طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. So I noticed some conversations are getting a little bit heated because of engineers. So don't just take it personal. The problem is I fill in the problem because I just walked in and I asked them to fix the PowerPoint. So now they're telling me you look for someone else to do it. يعني not all engineers are bad and not all the field is reprehensible, but sometimes you need to go against your principle just to get things done. So don't take it personal. The other comment I got before prayer is that you said you're not answering the questions, and I said at the beginning I'm not gonna answer the questions, or not all of the questions will be answered, because again it's not one-way thing. It's not I'm just lecturing on these things. We need to trigger thoughts. We need to challenge our way of thinking and to come up with answers collectively, or it doesn't have to be on the spot. Some things you just need to trigger the way you think about them, and then keep thinking about them for enough time you want. So that's the reason. And that could be a kind of disclaimer too, because sometimes I would say something not necessarily I believe in, but just to widen the horizon of the conversation or the discussion. But when it comes to my jokes about engineering, no, I believe in this. So that's another second disclaimer. So now I'm doing good, right? Okay, good. The third question that this lecture is covering is how do we learn? And it's a bit broad topic, but I will try to inshallah recap it or summarize it in few points. You need to understand the values of seeking knowledge, the conditions of seeking knowledge, the pillars of education as we call them. We'll go through them inshallah quickly. The etiquettes of seeking knowledge. You need to acquire certain etiquettes and manners the way you seek knowledge. And then you need to recognize the barriers, the things that would be an obstacle that would prevent you from seeking knowledge. These are the 5 points that we should be discussing inshallah. So there are multiple virtues or values of seeking knowledge. Maybe virtues are a better word because they're not the direct value. They are basically the characteristics of this lofty and noble process of seeking this lofty thing that we call it knowledge. So for example, the concept of freedom. That maybe I think in the Western academia, they just brag about this concept a lot, that you have so much flexibility about the way you choose your like discipline, you choose your major, and the concept of the selective courses that you choose in universities are actually under this concept of freedom or the concept of independence. And it's a good concept, by the way. I'm saying that really, that's one of the good things, because they're not the same way in all of the countries, right? They're not the same way in all of the educational systems. Some people, they would try to force you to study something that you might not be interested in, right? Yes, the partial will that you had is that you pick this school or this department to join, but sometimes you want to join and to study certain things. This doesn't necessarily mean that you are right in your choice, because maybe you do not know enough about this field. So they would tell you, we are the educators and we're telling you what you need to know, right? So it's just a fine line between these two things. Sometimes, okay, now I want to study engineering. And then the engineering school will tell me you have to study these courses to be an engineer. Okay? That might sound debatable to you, because who decided on this to be the only courses that I need to know to be an engineer? And who defines an engineer? Right? I need to study something else. If they're offering me 20, 30, 40 courses over 4 or 5 years, I just need 20. And let me select the other 20, for example. Right? So this concept of freedom of choosing not only the major or the field, sometimes the teacher. So there's a freedom of choosing the teacher. So when the educational system is offering you multiple speakers and teachers, this is something good, because you can actually just pick and choose whatever teacher that you want to study with. Sometimes it offers you a freedom of the curricula itself. This used to happen in our tradition, by the way. So you enter the Azhar Mosque, for example, back in history in Egypt, as just one example. So you would find the same ilm, the same branch of knowledge is being taught by 10 scholars. 5 of them, for example, are teaching 5 different books on the same level of the same field. So for example, I want to study Islamic law according to one certain school of thought, which is the Shafi'i school of thought, for example, and then I want to study level 1. You might find 5 different scholars, all in level 1, 5 different books on the same level, because we have multiple books, right? And then you choose. I'm going to choose this scholar, this circle, this assembly, this majlis, right? and then I'm gonna choose the other one because whatever reasons that you have for this. So all this comes under the concept of freedom or independence. And here is an example of what used to happen in Azhar Mosque, for example. So this is one of the philosophical concepts about the virtues of seeking knowledge. And again, it's a long thing. We might discuss it later, inshallah. The gradualness, which is logical thing, right? You need to go through gradual steps of seeking that knowledge. You cannot go for level 3 and you didn't finish the level 1. The concept of a beginner and then intermediate and then advanced, it's something just logical that you need to have in all sciences. You cannot just, some people are so excited to be attributed or to attribute to themselves the virtue and the characteristic of being knowledgeable in a field that they didn't spend enough time on. And we give that example of religion. And the problem is a lot of times we respect this in all fields except religion, right? When it comes to religion, we just want to take it easy because just the simple things that we need to know. Is religion ilm or not? That's the question we need to think of, right? When we say religion, Islam, is it ilm? Is it knowledge? Is it science? Or no, certain practices just you get to know through culture and that's it. What do you think? Is it like I want to say again, everybody knows the word ilm, right? So let's use this word. Ilm means knowledge, okay? So let's use this word nawat. Religion, any religion, is it ilm? Is it knowledge that you need to go through a process to understand so you're able to apply? Or no, just a set of beliefs and practices that you can know by any way and you just practice it the way you want? So it's, yes?
The knowledge should be the first, so I have to know and then I can believe it and practice it.
Mm-hmm. By the way, this is one of the outcomes of this question, right? Because the other one is it something that is very relative or absolute? Which means it's one thing and one version, and we need to do our best to understand it through certain limitations, or it's so relative and it depends on my culture, depends on my way of thinking, it depends on the age I'm living in. I can just interpret it the way I want. Right? This is one of the discussions that would come out from this question.
Follow some guidelines, but freedom is there.
Definitely what?
Freedom is there, but it follows some guidelines. It cannot go wherever it is. So it follows some boundary, then definitely freedom is there.
Okay, so certain things. So in Islam, for example, how do we view it? Everything is absolute,
No.
or everything is relative or subjective, or we have both?
Both. Combination.
Okay, percentage-wise, what is the percentage of the absolute?
Maybe 80%, 1/3.
What?
1/3.
What's it?
1/3.
1/3? Okay. 1/3 is absolute. 1/3 is relative. Okay. 10% is what?
I think there's a lot of very solid principles, maybe up to 80%, and then there's maybe variables from 20%.
Okay, what do you mean by absolute and relative?
Non-changing.
Absolute non-changing and relative changing. Okay. Okay. So let's relate back to the gradualness. We'll come back to this question because it's covered in a lot of slides. But this is a point that you need to think of. The Imam al-Bukhari is the great hadith scholar. He said a true scholar is the one who teaches people the basics of knowledge before its deep details. He used to call it صغار العلم قبل كباره. So because that's the logical order. That's the logical way of taking the steps towards seeking knowledge. Jumping over the levels, it's not something beneficial, and you're not going to end up anywhere. The comprehensiveness is one of the main virtues and characteristics in tradition. It is not anymore in our modern time. So before, scholars used to be very encyclopedic, right? You find Imam al-Shafi'i, for example, he's a scholar in all the Islamic sciences. You remember this circle, and a lot of other sciences of the other circles too. He was a great doctor, for example, his time. He was amazing in astronomy, some things towards biology. Like he knew a lot of different things. That was the nature of his time. Imam al-Razi, for example, the famous philosopher, he's a philosopher, astronomer, doctor. He authored the very famous The Canon book. He authored the tafsir on the Quran. He authored a lot of books on usul al-fiqh, a lot of books on logic and philosophy, fiqh itself, Islamic law, everything, language, everything you imagine. Razi wrote about it. When he actually wrote about tafsir, when he made that tafsir of the Quran, the explanation of the Quran, he used to go all over the place. He's writing a commentary on Surah Al-Fatiha, the opening surah of the Quran. He explains every single thing, not every single thing only in the verses. He goes all over the place. And that was one way why people criticized his tafsir. One scholar was really harsh against him, and he said, فيه كل شيء إلا التفسير. He said, this book has everything except tafsir. Tafsir means explanation of the Quran. He was harsh. I don't agree with this statement, but he said that. And other scholar, he got offended. A third scholar got offended by this. I said, no, فيه كل شيء مع التفسير. It has tafsir and it has everything. The other one, he was criticizing him, but he was also praising him. That he just encompassed all of these different ulum in one book. He took the Quran as the base and he just went all over the different branches of knowledge. The point is, he was like such an amazing erudite person. Someone who had a huge intellectual capacity to encompass all these different ulum. That's the nature of that time. We do not have this anymore. Now we are in the modern time of specialization, right? Everybody, even within the science itself, people specialize in certain things. Not just a general practitioner of something. No, he knows very detailed. This is the concept of masters and PhDs, right? Big part of the concept is you just focus on one thing. So you are an expert on finance, right? But when you made your thesis in PhD, you pick in one single topic, you put 80% of your effort on it. For sure, you should have a large background of this ilm or science in general, but you still focus on one single thing, which is a little bit different than the concept of knowledge before. We need to know these differences to understand the tradition too. The dedication, and that's a very common thing, we'll talk about it all the time. They used to say that knowledge will not give you a part of it unless you give it your whole self. You need to give the entirety of yourself to knowledge to gain just part of it. Respect for teachers, that's something that was a very main characteristic of the knowledge environment back in history. And when I mention this here, I don't mean specifically to respect me as someone who's talking. I'm not your teacher. I'm just a brother or a friend who's giving you some random information. But the concept of respecting the one who's teaching you the knowledge is something that is very, very basic in our history that sometimes you might think it's too much, right? Sometimes if you read the stories, the way they used to respect teachers in an unbelievable way. And that's something really nice about the tradition, about the culture of knowledge. Number 6 is the centrality of the masjid. That the masjid was the center, the mosque was the center of all these activities. But again, usually when we say this concept, we don't mean the center physically of these activities, because they had a lot of schools and universities, even back in history. But the concept is the masjid is the main hub of all these activities, is the place that triggers all of these things. Again, not physically in the building itself, but the masjid as the place where Muslims practice their acts of worship, the main practice act of worship specifically, which is the prayer, is the one place that triggers all these initiatives of spreading knowledge among people. That's the concept of the centralization of the mosque. The example for this all the time we give is the prophetic mosque in Al-Madinah. He built the mosque when he moved to Al-Madinah after the second immigration, and then sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then he established everything in the mosque. There was some realistic factor that they didn't have a lot of buildings at that time, so they used the mosque for everything, even sometimes for entertainment in the mosque, which is a beautiful thing to give us that the concept of a mosque is much wider than you think. It's not just a place you pray and leave. You can do everything in the mosque. People gather. It's a social hangout. It's a place that you can socialize. It's a place that you can do some business with some conditions and limitations that were mentioned in Islamic law, for example. Not the mosque is a reason for your business, but I mean you can meet to do these things in the mosque, for example. But the fiqh, the Islamic law was a little bit strict about these things. How can we hold transactions in the mosque, for example? I mean, we're interested in all these details because the mosque was in the center of the thinking all the time. This is what I meant by centrality of the masjid or the mosque, specifically when it comes to knowledge, for sure. The first place we think of when it comes to halaqas or programs or courses, the mosque comes first. So these are the 6 values or characteristics of seeking knowledge. And then the following point was, okay, what are the conditions that we need here to be able to seek knowledge? The conditions of a seeker of knowledge, to be able to attain this ilm. How many ones here attended the intensive ilm retreat that we had a couple months ago? Okay, so if you remember, we mentioned 6 qualities that a person has to know to be able to seek knowledge. And there was that couple of poetry Imam al-Shafi'i said about them. That question was a trap, so now you need to answer. So he said, yeah. So he said, when he said, أَخِي لَن تَنَالَ الْعِلْمَ إِلَّا بِسِتَّةٍ, he mentioned 6 qualities that you need to embody in your life to gain knowledge or attain knowledge. So he talked about time, like long time, basically, right? So that's one. What else? The rest you can just guess what were things that we need. Yes.
Keenness.
Keenness. Yeah.
Like a empty mind, it's not empty mind, but it's like more like focused.
Focused. Okay. Efforts. Teacher. Interest.
No prejudice.
What?
No prejudice. You should have clean mind without prejudice.
Ah, okay. Intelligence. Means. Okay. So basically, they're almost the 6. So he said, أخي لن تنال العلم إلا بستة. You're not going to be able to seek knowledge except through 6 qualities. سأنبيك عن تفصيلها ببيان. I will state them clear to you. So the first thing he mentioned is ذكاء, intelligence. When he said intelligence, or maybe literally smartness, what are your thoughts on the concept of smartness versus stupidity, for example? When you ascribe someone to be smart versus stupid, what does that mean to you?
Well, it's more like being open-minded. I wouldn't say like intellectual, like you can't really define it as a term of like, oh, you're Marx or something like that. It's more of your outlook.
Your what?
Your outlook.
Okay. This is the way you view a smart person, or that's the definition of a smart person?
Maybe that's how a smart person would be. I don't know.
Okay.
Say a smart person is someone who makes informed decisions based on facts or something credible at least. And a stupid person is someone who just doesn't think about things, just acts on emotion and just reacts rather than puts thought into their decisions.
Okay.
Someone who questions things.
This is a smart person.
Yes.
Questions things. Okay. Any other thoughts? What? To retain what he studied. Okay. Focus. Okay, yeah. Different. It's different, so it means somebody is smart and someone is not, right? Okay, what is the definition of not smart person or a stupid person? Okay, another question. Everybody is potentially smart or stupid? Everybody is potentially smart. That's a correct statement.
Some people are smart stuff, like not people smart.
I mean potentially. Like he has the inner ability of being smart.
Yes.
Everybody's like that.
Unless they're mentally challenged or have a psychological disorder. Right? If they're born with something
So that means he's potentially smart, but there might be a kind of an
limited. Yeah, I think everybody's
everybody's potentially smart. Okay, your answer, I mean all of you, your answer entails there is a process that he has to go through to acquire this attribute of being smart. Right? He's potentially smart, but now he's not. Basically, like hypothetically. So he needs to do things or to go through things to be a smart. What is this process? What does he need to do to be a smart person? What?
Experience.
Experience.
Seek knowledge.
Seek knowledge.
Like, he has to put effort in his studies and stuff, like research.
Is it?
practice the knowledge that you learn.
Practice the knowledge what?
That was learned.
That was learned. Okay. So that, yes.
They need to realize their strengths.
To realize the strengths. So do you agree that there is no stupid person potentially? Okay, so your answer means if he does not take this process of being smart, that means he's stupid. Or he's not smart. Let's be more nice. Okay, he's not smart. So there is a process. You're potentially smart. Take this process, you're going to be smart. If not, you're not smart. Is this the way you think of it?
You just stay in one place.
You what?
You just stay in one place. You don't progress, and you don't get.
Okay, so this.
You just stay in one place.
So this default position, smart or not? Potentially
No,
is.
that person just stays in the one place. If they're not willing to do things to become more intelligent or ask questions or do any work behind it, they're not going to evolve past what they already are.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think the only thing that we agreed on maybe is that everybody is potentially smart, right? So when he said, let's back to the qualities that he mentioned. When he said dhaka, intelligence or smartness, he didn't mean this very limited definition of a person being smart versus stupid. He actually meant something close to what you mentioned, that kind of somebody who's potentially smart, which means what is your intellectual capacity? Your struggle is not, are you smart or not? Your struggle is to define your intellectual capacity. I think this is the struggle of every person. Being able to define your intellectual capacity and then define your interest, that's the main struggle. And then you will be smart, right? It's not that somebody who he didn't do anything yet and he's smart or he's not smart. There's no such a thing basically. But the concept is, okay, that's my capacity of learning and thinking. And then my best and most important interest is that field. So I'm gonna focus on that field. If you define these two things correctly, you will excel in your life. This is what he meant by dhaka or the intelligence. So you cannot say I'm not smart. You cannot say I do not have enough time to read, or I do not have enough time to seek knowledge. And Imam Shafi'i is talking about from experience. He's talking about this from experience. He's someone who had tremendous scholarships, and he had like one of the greatest levels of legal reasoning in our tradition. He actually established a full school of thought that had millions of followers throughout history until today. So that means he understood the concept of the capacity of growing through or within your intellectual capacity. And we have a lot of examples for this in history. Starting the time of, if you talk about the Muslim history, starting the time of the Prophet and his companions and the successors, the tabi'een, the scholars, we had millions of examples. We have a modern example that I usually like to raise when I talk about this point, which is the example of Malcolm X. And it's a great example about this. Someone who really, regardless of his political agenda, but I'm talking about somebody who really understood his intellectual capacity. How can he work on his intellectual capacity to grow it until he reached to that level? If you read his autobiography, and I would really recommend you to read it, and he mentioned that until like kind of all phase in his life, like after he became an adult and at a certain age that now he passed long time in his life, and he was in jail, he said, I started receiving some letters from friends, the correspondence that would happen through the prison system. And then some friends are just sending me letters and papers. Then he said, one time I wanted to just respond to one of these letters. And I found out a very painful fact that I couldn't write one meaningful sentence. He said, I couldn't. So now we know Malcolm X as this great orator and public speaker, one of the best public speakers in his time, right? And he held debates all over the biggest learning institutes in basically in the States for sure, and other parts of the world too. He's an amazing public speaker, right? People actually tried to learn his skills in public speaking. But at a point of time, he wasn't able to write one meaningful sentence. So he said, I felt so bad. And I went to the prison's library and I picked one book. And this book was a dictionary, by the way. I took it to my cell, and then I decided to ascribe the whole thing. So just I brought my just blank papers, and I could just copy in the dictionary until I copied all. So at the end, I found out wow, all these words I have no idea about. There are millions of words that I've never thought of. I've never used in my speeches. I never used in my just kalam and regular talk. I've never used in writing. Then he decided to read more. So he said, I don't recall exactly what is the number of months he spent on this. He read all of the books in the library. And then when he came out, he was that person that everybody knows to be the sort of genius who worked on liberating his people, as he said. But he understood that he wanted to liberate himself first through knowledge before liberating other people. So when his main goal was to liberate his people, again, regardless of the agenda, but he actually did this through knowledge. He said, I need to figure out what is my main interest and how can I grow in that concept of knowledge and being a knowledgeable person and a one who has principles in life. I need to go through that process first. These examples that we mention all the time, not just about this person, it tells you that one of our biggest crises is ignorance, right? It's one of the main crises that we face. Ignorance at all levels. Ignorance on the level of our creed and ideology. Ignorance on a social level. Ignorance on a political level. When you open all these fields and you discuss our problems and crises, ignorance will come at first place because this is really the main problem that we are facing. So that's why he mentioned it the first thing. You find out your intellectual capacity, then you talk about the hirs, the keenness, how you are very keen towards that, how you are this thirst for seeking knowledge. People whose antenna is always up. They're always keen to seek knowledge and to gain more of that knowledge. We have millions of examples that we can talk about for hours. Abdullah ibn Abbas is the great example for this, the Sahabi of the Prophet, the companion of the Prophet ﷺ. When the Prophet died, maybe we'll conclude a couple of minutes inshallah. So when the Prophet died, he realized something that a lot of other people didn't. Or maybe they did, but they didn't act on this. He went to one of his friends and he said, let's start documenting the heritage of the Prophet. Let's start seeking knowledge, basically, in a wider concept. He said literally, let's start asking, this is the word he used, the companions of the Prophet about their experience with him. So this man didn't understand, this friend didn't understand his vision. He told him, do you think people will leave those big shots of the companions and he come to you? He was very young. He was 14 years old. He said, you think people will leave those big names of the companions and come to you to ask you about something in religion? Who are you to ask you about these things? But it was as simple to him as the Prophet died, those people would die, right? And it's just like an accumulative thing. If you do not keep delivering that tradition, it's gonna get lost. So he said, I left him, okay, thank you. And he went by himself. He said, I kept knocking the doors of people. And I would tell them, I know you were with the Prophet at that situation. Can you tell me what happened? I know you heard the Prophet saying this. I know you attended that battle, you attended that problem, you attended this negotiation. Just tell me. He kept doing that. A few years later, he didn't live for that long, just normal person. But a few years later, one other student of him said, I've witnessed myself, Abdullah ibn Abbas. If he would disagree with 500 of the companions on something, he would be able to convince them all to his own opinion. He attained that much of knowledge. And he had all these skills that was able to convince everybody with his own opinion. Not just because he's a good speaker, but because of the knowledge that he gained and the trust that everybody gave him in society, that is now one of our most knowledgeable people, even if he's the youngest among us. He was very young again, he was one of the consultants of Umar ibn al-Khattab, that great caliph, and he was the youngest one. Some people told him this is a little boy, why is he with us in the council of consultants? And he embarrassed them all by asking them all questions that they all answered wrongly except Abdullah ibn Abbas. He answered that question right. So that was the vision Abdullah ibn Abbas had. If we didn't have such people in our tradition, we wouldn't have all this ilm until today. We wouldn't have the authentic copy of Quran, right? We wouldn't have all these hadith and reports from the Prophet ﷺ. All these things actually built that tradition. And you can read about his keenness. He would go sleep in front of one of the companions' houses because it's the nap time, afternoon. He said, I felt bad to knock his door. I just slept. He said when he walked out, he thought I'm a beggar because he wrapped himself with his own cloak or aba'a. He said he woke me up and he said just go please. He said he found out that I'm Abdullah. So he said, oh, you are, he's the nephew, the cousin of the Prophet ﷺ. He said, you are the cousin of the Prophet. You would have told me and I would come to you. He told him, no, because I come to knowledge. Knowledge does not come to me. It's okay, I can put all this effort because he appreciates that concept of knowledge. Now we have a lot of different means. We have online things. We have halaqas and courses. You get millions of advertisements and courses teaching you everything in life, basically. And you're just lazy. You're not interested. Because sometimes when you offer a lot of things, you do not appreciate these things. But you need to build that keenness in your heart and your mind first before approaching this. And that's why the third thing he mentioned was the ijtihad, the effort and the struggle. When he said, لا ينال العلم براحة الجسد. He said, you will never attain knowledge with the comfort of your body. You need to pain yourself to seek knowledge. It doesn't have to be in literal physical meaning, but you need to put some effort. Lack of sleep, lack of sometimes of financial resources, lack of time. These things pain you, but you see the fruit of this in the future. This is the first three things that Imam Shafi mentioned about the qualities that we need to embody to seek knowledge. Inshallah, we'll talk more about the other three things next week, inshallah. Thank you for your attentive listening. Jazakumullahu khairan. If there's any question, you can ask now if you want. If some people are in rush, feel free to just to leave. I'm here, inshallah, for any questions. We'll see you next week. Inshallah, we'll start sharp on time, 6 p.m. with a little break for Maghrib, and then we'll continue, inshallah. Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum.